Hi there. We're going to get started here in just a moment with Puppy from Hell's beam tutorial. Since this is a tutorial night, I won't be saying very much during any of this. You might hear some comments here and there, maybe some questions asked, and a little bit of guiding the general public and being orderly. But this is Puppy from Hell's event. He's going to teach us how to use beams, both spinal and turreted, properly.
Okay, so let's start off. I have a couple of I've got 20 here. I have a couple of demos here set up. And I gotta turn off the AI on all of these, unfortunately. Okay. You moving? Stop moving. All right, that looks okay. All right, so this is basic stuff.
Send traffic.
So we've got a ship here with a beam. It's got a bunch of other stuff on it because I just grabbed a ship that had a beam on it. We've got it in 3 ships with beams in 3 different firing positions, and we're going to demonstrate some tactical considerations for when you're using beams and shooting at large targets, because it does matter which angle you're shooting from, even when track firing. So if we start with this first one, we'll do a quick track fire here. And you'll see, of course, we're hitting mostly this bow section. And that means we can't do the most important thing that is required when we're doing beam fighting is shoot out the engines of the target. When the engines are shot out, then it's not moving, makes it a lot easier to hit, and you can move on to the next thing we'll cover, which is position aiming. Same thing here. We're on the side. Just going to choose an aim point somewhere on the side. This one's in the middle. Sometimes it'll go in the front. Sometimes it'll go in the back.
Standing by.
And that means that most of the time, you really want to try and be firing from the rear. Because from the rear, you go right into the engines. Just like that. So this ship's not moving. Once it is immobilized, the engines will go off. They'll turn black. And you can start doing the next thing that is very important when you're using beams is position aiming. So
send traffic.
When you're within, I think, about 2 kilometers, 2.5 kilometers, you can see the visual model of a ship, and these are all, they've got things on them that you can target, like these turrets. And beams do a lot of damage, and that means you can take turrets out pretty quickly. So if let's do this slowly so people can see how this works. So position aiming is when you fire without firing on a track. So you start your weapon, you open your weapon menu, you go to weapons, you go to beam, you can see positions highlighted here. That means you can fire wherever you want. We've got this little aimer here. And the easiest way to do this when you're in actual combat is to start off, focus on your target, like I am here. You go to your attack map, you bring up your weapon menu, you get your weapon, you line up this little targeting pip with the projected pip from the enemy target. So this one here that I'm lined up with. And you get it roughly in the right distance. You can see how it shades darker if I'm too far past, and it's lighter if I'm forward. You don't need to be too exact, just get it roughly in. And you can come out of the tack view and fine-tune your aim point so that you're directly firing on, like, this turret here. Like that. And see, that turret is now destroyed. And you can just pretty quickly strip off all of the turrets on, say, a battleship in a couple of seconds.
Eyes on target.
So, all gone.
Understood.
And now this battleship's disarmed. I can destroy it at my leisure. All right, so there's one more thing that I want to demonstrate here in this little basic setup, and that's the specific way that Battle Short works. So we'll let this fire here, get this charge off. So you can see my beams charging now on the bottom of the screen here. And we know that Battle Short, when you turn Battle Short on and your beam is firing, it'll start doing damage to the beam the longer it fires. But that damage doesn't start happening until you've used up all of the charge you've recharged. So here I've got it about halfway charged. And if I start firing and hit Battle Short, I won't do damage until I've used up all this charge. So you can see not taking damage, not taking damage, not taking damage, and I'll be taking damage here in a second. Just there. So that's important, because it means you can get kind of quick bursts to keep a ship disabled while you're trying to finish it off. Okay. Have there been any questions in the chat for this section? Okay. All right. So I'm going to go back to the main menu. And we're going to move on to the next section, which is structure break. Beam guide structure break. So one thing I didn't cover yet about beams is they have two buffing modules, the focus particle accelerator and the energy regulator. That is true, but in reality, most of the time what you want is the focus particle accelerator for a reason that we'll get into with this next section after this one. Focus particle accelerator buffs damage, E-regs, energy regulator is also called E-regs. They buff uptime. So for this section here, we're going to demonstrate a specific way to quickly finish off disabled ships. So say you've got your ship disabled, it can't move, you've stripped off all its weapons, now you need to finish it off. So the idea here is to structure break a ship. And structure break is what happens when a ship takes too much damage. It doesn't go into the components, but it goes into a specific structure hitbox, and there's a diagram of this in the new player's pins for anybody who's more interested in that. And once you keep doing, if you do enough damage to that structure, any extra damage you do goes into a random component, and it can take a ship from alive to 0 in seconds. So I have this ship set up here to aim and fire at this CL. CLs have 5,500 hit points of structure damage. Beams do between 300 and 500 damage per second, depending on how much you buff them. I don't think this is buffed at all. This is buffed with 4. Okay, so this is about 500 damage per second. And so it's about 11 seconds to structure break this CL, and we'll see that now.
Rounds
so I'm going to turn
incoming.
that on.
Affirmative.
We'll turn Battleship on,
Go
so we
ahead,
just keep
Commander.
firing. So not doing any damage to the CL now, but in a couple seconds you'll see everything go kind of red, and once it's structure broken. So it's structure
Component
broken now,
destroyed.
and you see
Damage
a whole
control.
bunch of stuff
We
is
lost
getting
a
destroyed.
component. We're losing components. Component
So-
destroyed.
This is why you never really ever
Component
want to be
destroyed.
structure broken, because this can then happen for like guns or missiles or anything like that. With beams in particular, it's pretty devastating because
We're
you
ready when you
can
are, Commander.
pinpoint aim the
We'll
beam
get it done, Commander.
to target
We've restored
only
a
the
module.
structure box and dump all of your damage as fast as possible into it. And we
ready
can see
when
this
you
is
are,
something that is
Commander.
even effective
At the
on
ready,
larger
Commander.
ships. So this is 6,500 hit points of damage. If we turn the beam
Commander,
on,
they've opened fire.
it'll work. This time I'm going to just turn the time scale up, and we'll see how many cycles it takes to structure break this CH. So that was 1. So,
We're taking
2,
fire, Commander.
and it should be 3,
The
I
enemy
think?
has
3 or
engaged.
4.
Tell us what to do, Commander.
The first
Hostile
thing,
fire
yeah,
inbound.
4. So it's structure broken now.
The enemy has engaged.
And you can see it's
Comms
gonna
are restored.
it's in a lot of trouble.
Ship is taking heavy damage.
How can we help
So that's
today?
that one,
Standing
and then
by.
even for a battleship,
Under fire.
which is
Disabled.
8,000 structure hit points,
Standing by.
which would be
Data link is restored.
5, I believe,
Hold
hits.
intact. Data link is restored.
So that was 2.
Channels are
And then we'll
taking
see 3.
fire.
Heavy shots here. Protocol. Go.
Damage
4,
report.
and I think the next one should structure break it. And you can use battle short for this. Yeah, there it's structure broken. You can use battle short for this, but you can also, if the ship's immobilized, not shooting back, you can just let your beam charge and keep shooting it.
Taking hit. Disabled.
Yeah, CH just died.
What's the plan?
This battleship's not feeling pretty good.
We're under fire. Destroyed.
So that's structure break. We will move on to the section after this, which is specifically about lethality. If there's not any questions about structure break, I can't see the chat right now. So, okay, moving forward. So I mentioned particle accelerators and E-regs. Particle accelerators buff damage, and that's really important. That's really important because beams do damage in a very specific way that can lead to them not doing a lot of damage, effective damage at all. So every second, and a beam's damage per second is displayed in damage per second, a beam will fire 5 times per second. So that's that value you see in the fleet editor, that 300 damage per second or 500 damage per second, should really be divided by 5 to get the effective amount. And that's important because it takes it from 300 to 60, which falls under the damage threshold of many components, especially when you consider specific hull's damage reduction, which takes a flat percentage of damage off the top of any incoming damage. So as an example, here's a beam shooting at a sprinter, and this sprinter has a reinforced drive in it. And
Receiving.
Rounds incoming.
Aye, aye, Commander.
we can beam this
Engineering's
sprinter,
having
and the
issues
sprinter
with
is
the drive.
just 1,000 meters away.
Got you, 5
Beams
by
have
5.
fall off as well, and that's why these are all set up at different ranges. But this is 1,000 meters. Your beam's doing pretty much full damage here, and it will never, ever, ever destroy this reinforced drive. I'll keep this firing until
Standing by.
the beam goes red and it stops firing, and it won't
Got you, 5 by 5.
destroy this drive. And that's because the drive has a damage threshold higher than 60. So beam's red,
Receiving.
drive's not out.
I
So,
noticed
question?
I noticed that missiles do this as well. They
Missiles,
can't always go through the threshold.
yes, missiles also do this, where they have they do damage in increments of 50, which
Copy
has a
that,
similar
Commander.
effect, where they can seem like they're not doing a lot of damage.
Send your traffic.
So, for beam fall off, that's really where the focused particle accelerators can really help, and we'll demonstrate that here with these Axfords with different numbers of particle accelerators arranged at different ranges,
We're ready whenever you
and
are.
we'll see how well this works. When I was testing this, the accuracy kind of got a little wonky when loading the save game. These
Go ahead, Commander.
Axfords are all aimed at the Citadel CIC here,
Our drive's working again.
and the Citadel CIC has a damage threshold of 50,
At the ready, Commander.
which means that sometimes you can kill it with the beam, sometimes not. The Axford
whenever
itself
you
also
are.
has a damage reduction value of 40%,
How can we
so
help today,
that
Commander?
also cuts off some damage. And we're gonna start this
Taking fire.
firing.
Receiving. We need to get that component
And
online.
so the magazine has a damage threshold of 40, which means it can be destroyed, but the Citadel has a
How can we
50,
help
which means it
today,
cannot.
Commander?
We'll turn battle short on so you
Waiting
can see
orders.
that. So it'll just stay alive.
Send your traffic. We're ready whenever you
And
are.
that's with one focused particle accelerator. So at
Send your traffic.
700 meters, with one focused particle accelerator, you can't
Waiting
get
for your
through
orders, Commander.
a Citadel CIC on an Axford.
Send traffic.
Acellos have the same damage reduction value. Liners have a similar damage reduction value. So these results broadly hold for both of those two ship classes as well. At 3,000, with two focus particle accelerators, your range goes from
We're ready
700
whenever you
meters,
are.
600, 700 meters,
Receiving.
up to about 3,200 meters that you can get through those.
We have
Or
internal damage
3,000
been
meters, I'm sorry, I was looking at the
sitting
wrong
for your
ship.
orders, Commander.
So you can see again, Citadel CIC is red, but it's not
Set
destroyed.
traffic.
Standing
With
by.
3, that goes up to about 4,000 meters.
We're ready whenever you are.
Same thing. The beam's going a little bit past the Citadel
We need to
CIC
get that component
because
online.
they have they actually have like a cylinder hitbox.
Standing by.
But you can see we didn't destroy the Citadel.
Receiving.
And with 4, that goes up to about 4,500 meters.
We lost a component. Aye, Command.
So it means that tactically, when you're in a
That component
fight,
offline.
range control is
lost
really
the
important.
Ready.
And even when you're playing against beams, it's also really important.
Ready.
Because it means you can... 100 meters could be the difference between
Force
life and
landing.
death here. So I'll move this Axford forward about 300 meters. And that Citadel CIC will go from being alive to being dead. And we can't kill it more than once, so we're only going to do this with one Axford.
Aye,
Component
Command.
taken out. Hull breach.
And
Component
there it
destroyed.
goes. So
Hull breach.
you can
Component
see
destroyed.
how important that range control is. And I have made a tool so that you can explore this in excruciating detail with a bunch of graphs if you want to find that. It's linked in the new players' pins as well. All right, so that's lethality. Any questions about that? I know we had the one about missiles. Any other questions about that? Okie dokie. Moving. Oh,
For the part, I joined a little late. What was the part about the structure breaking? Just very quickly.
so very quickly, when you're in a fight with a ship, another ship, especially capital ship, and you have beams, a very quick and kind of efficient way to, well, maybe not efficient, but an effective way to destroy that ship is to position aim with a beam in the structure hitbox, structure break it, because beams can do that very quickly, and then once it's structure broken, pretty much all its modules are going to die in a few seconds
Structure.
after that. I'm not going to go back over the demo again. This is all going to be recorded, so you can watch the video later. But does that answer your question?
Okay.
Also, if people have questions, if they could write in the voice text chat attached to general, that would be great. It keeps it a little more orderly and the way to be called on. That'd be fantastic. Thank you.
Excellent. So the last little demo here is something that is tactically relevant sometimes, but a lot of times it's just a flex, and I can't help showing off a little bit sometimes. And I hope you do too once you see this. So for this, I got to enable enemy control real quick. And we can see, so I have a container liner here. Beam turrets especially, and I haven't tested this, but beam destroyers on the test branch, potentially. They're agile enough, the beam turrets are agile enough to even shoot down missiles, generally slow-moving missiles, so like cruise hybrids in their cruise stage, or containers, or torpedoes, but sometimes S2s as well. And we're just going to do a little quick demo here. So we're going to take... I like that we can't see them firing. Very cool. Well, they'll fire.
Yes, Commander.
So we're going to fire some missiles. And the specific micro actions here are lock with the bullseye. Oh, it's on hold fire. That's why it's not firing.
Awaiting your
Lock
orders,
with the
Commander.
bullseye and or parallax or whatever, and then fire on the missile. It takes some practice to kind of really get the hang of it, but especially for missiles
Missile
in
detected.
a
Target
long
locked.
range or in a stream, kind of like containers tend to come in,
Aye, aye, Commander.
you can take out a lot of missiles very
Target
quickly.
locked. We're locked on target. We are locked on to target.
And I've turned battle short on.
We are locked on to target.
That one's
Spiker,
a
Spiker.
little out of the arc. Oh no, so I got 2 of them. And oh, can we see that from here? No, but we can see 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So yeah, I got 2 of them. Sometimes you can get all of them. This one,
Awaiting
I
your
just wasn't
orders,
as fast on the button as I usually am. But that's a fun little demo. All right, so now I'm going to pause for a second before we move on to the strategic side of things. I'm going to check the voice chat. All right, so Nightshade asks, for a short burst, does that give a full reload cycle, or does the reload percentage get set to 0 the moment you start firing? So, yes, that whenever you fire the beam, no matter how long you fire it for, it does a full recharge cycle. But the caveat there is that if you are, especially when you're shooting at missiles like that, you're not usually shooting the beam for very long, and you only take battle short damage after you go past your like charged up cooldown time. So if you charge for a second's worth of beam firing time, you can fire that without taking any battle short damage, and that's usually all you need to fire against missiles. All right, so that's the only question in the voice chat. So we're going to move on to the strategic considerations. And we're going to look at pillars first. I will load this up. Pillars guide, Center Rock setup starters. All right, so I have these all set up as demos set about 3 minutes into a game with the starter fleets and deployed and positioned in a relatively realistic fashion that you might encounter. And that should turn off the AI for now. And I'm going to be making these
Awaiting your orders, Commander.
these save game files available after this, so that you can take all of these and play against the AI and kind of practice. I'm going to try and turn the AI off, but we'll see if it actually turns off. Sometimes it doesn't want to do that. So strategically, what we have done here is we've deployed TF-Ash. This is with TF-Ash, kind of in the middle here. So if you were looking at the deploy screen like this, we've deployed in the center of the screen, and we've moved as quickly as possible to this middle rock
traffic.
in pillars. And this rock is big. Yes, the AI is not off, it seems. So this rock is quite big, and I've split up TF-Ash into 3 separate destroyers pointing in different directions to kind of cover different angles. And with these beams being 6 kilometers in range, because they're on a destroyer, you can see if we zoom out, this ring on the outside here, that's 5 kilometers. So 6 kilometers is about here. And you can see how much range that covers on pillars specifically. It covers the D point, it gets to the B point, it certainly covers the A point. You can see we kind of get to, well, it's hard to see because it doesn't show a sphere projection. Let me... Yeah, here we go. So we can see it kind of gets to the C point, and you can even see 6 kilometers can get almost to the E point there. And that means they have to push, the enemy team has to push you out of this rock, and that's really hard to do because there's a big rock in the way. They can't shoot through it, they can't missile through it, they can try and missile around it, but oftentimes you'll see that coming beforehand and just move slightly so the missiles miss. And you have perfect access to the A point, which means any ships that try to capture the A point, like a little shuttle here, you can just beam and they won't be able to do that. Here's a shuttle. It's still moving. So like this shuttle here, if we were to send it over,
Send traffic.
Command's on the line.
you can see, you'll be able to see that we
Standing
can
by.
just beam it as it comes. If you do end up getting pushed, there are good retreat paths too. And the objective when you're retreating, because you're getting pushed by
Send your traffic.
LNs or Acellos or something that can really hurt you, is to keep this rock in between you and them all the time. And that's pretty easy to do because it's a big rock. But your retreat paths, for example, if you're getting pushed, you might come backwards to D and kind of take a spot in this rock up here.
Copy that. Moving. Holding here.
You can also come back. Where's my move button? You can also come back to here. This is a little more precarious, but you can even come back as well, all the way back if you're really getting pushed hard.
We hear you, command.
We're going to be in the shuttle now.
Send traffic.
A trickier thing you can do if you're getting pushed is you can actually, if they're coming over the top, you can actually move forward
Helm, take us in.
and underneath this rock over here, and that will, in addition to kind of getting you out of dodge,
Reversing thrust.
it will also put you even further into their back lines, which is kind of right where you want to be because everything's ripe for the pickings for you to beam.
We hear you, command. Aye, aye, commander.
This is going to be a little wonky. Well, we don't need to wait for this. On the test branch that is up right now, destroyers, a long-standing problem with destroyers and aiming at small targets has been fixed so that they aim faster and more accurately. You've probably noticed that destroyers will often miss their first shot. So this opening position here is quite strong. And
Send traffic.
it can by itself win the game. Just you coming here, beaming the first shuttle that goes to A, and then being impossible to dislodge can itself just win the game for you without even needing to fire any other shots, because they simply cannot push you this hard, especially with your team backing you up. So, let's go look at another opening here. And this one we're going to look at with the starter fleet TF Hemlock. TF Hemlock has a beam Axford with some 250 guns and a missile backpack on it. And we're going to ignore... I like how it starts me all the way out. We're going to ignore the AI for
At the
now.
ready, commander.
Because I'm going to go through these a little faster than the first one. So for this, if we zoom out to like a deploy screen, we're deploying kind of roughly in this area here.
Stop the ship.
I forgot there we go. I can pause the game. We're deploying roughly in this area here and moving again as quickly as possible. You got to hit flank and come in a straight line to this rock on the right side of the A point. Oftentimes you might hear this rock called the pillbox rock because its amount of cover and vague shape kind of sets you up as like an old school pillbox that you with a beam instead of a machine gun. It's got close access to the A point so that you can deny any captures from the other team. And it also has
Command.
relatively close access to the E point, so you can assist your team with any pushes that they might want to do. The other kind of secondary play when you deploy here after the initial opening salvos have been fired is to take your ship and move it out of there, either over to this rock over here, or up to this other rock over here to kind of further solidify your presence in the middle as a controlling force. This beam turret is again a 5-kilometer range as opposed to the beam destroyer's 6-kilometer range. So we can see, if I set this out to 5 kilometers, we can see this is roughly the kind of angle we have for cover. We can get to the D point. We can get to the A point. We can get to the E point. And that's about it until we move to our secondary position. Retreat paths, if you're pushed, and it's important to have a retreat path because sometimes it just does not go according to plan, is to generally come backwards either to the right side of the rock underneath the D point or to the left side, and use those as more cover. You can also, if the opportunity presents itself, move forward like you could before, at the middle rock here. And again, entrench yourself into the enemy lines if they're pushing hard on like the east side, for example. Okay, that is this deployment, and we're going to move on to the next one. I've got a bunch of these. So, Pillars Guide, red side, Hemlock. So this is from the other side, because believe it or not, you can play games with ANS on the red side and not the blue side. I recommend it. It's a lot of fun. And it's a nice change of pace. So for this side, we're going to go through the same thing before. Your deployment is kind of at this angle. You want to deploy facing this rock here. Or you can come in on the other side. And you're burning, again, as fast as possible to this rock that is kind of in between. It gives you a little roof over your head. Again, you're close to the A point, so you can deny any potential capping shuttles or anything that might want to cap that point. But it is, for the most part, the only point you're really close to in an offensive capability. Your overall team strategy on this side of the map should be to capture your E point, your B point, deny the A point for as long as possible, and then quickly capture it and use that to your advantage to then snowball and win the game. On the other hand, this is defensively a pretty strong position. The enemy has to push forward pretty far to kind of attack this position, and the amount of angles they have on it is very narrow, especially if you're kind of pushed backwards a little bit, like we are here. There are retreat paths back to E. You can retreat to B, but generally, this is a strong enough defensive position that you won't find yourself needing to retreat very often. You can do this. This is with TF Hemlock as just an example, but you can, of course, do this with TF Ash as well. You might want to split them up again to cover different angles, but that is up to you when you're playing. Okay, so that covers pillars. I'm going to check the chat here. Are there any... There's no specific questions about pillars right now. Are there any questions that people haven't asked yet about pillars from a strategic perspective? I'm going to give it 3 seconds. Would these positions also work well for OSP's Plasma 100mm and Plasma 250mm fleets? Yes, but oftentimes, no. It's difficult because while the Plasma and 100mm combination is strong, and the Plasma 250mm combination is strong, you often end up a bit more exposed than you would if you're playing with beams. It's not as strong as a beam, so you often end up a little bit more exposed and taking a little bit more damage, which makes it a little bit easier to push you, and that can tend to push you kind of over the edge from holding a point to running away. On the other hand, if you're playing against a team that is maybe less coordinated or doesn't quite know how to handle that, you can, as OSP with the plasma combo, do a lot of work just making them not able to come near you. Okay. Torps and rockets, they can work too, but generally with torps and rockets, you want to be more forward. You want to be attacking offensively and not kind of holding space defensively. Okay, I'm going to move on to the next map, which is Tumbleweed, Canyon, D side. Tumble, Guide, D Canyon, Ash. There we go. Tumbleweed is often known as the beam map because of its close quarters. It's got that name for a reason. Beams are very, very strong on Tumbleweed. There's a lot of spaces to hide, and a lot of not a lot of long angles that you can take advantage of to kind of force people out of positions. So,
Standing by.
as with the theme, we deploy kind of in a straight line and go as fast as possible to where we want to go. So you want to move to this area under into the side of the D point here. And this gives you coverage over the D point so you can deny any captures there. Oftentimes you might be a little late. So if you run a whiplash or something, that can be helpful. I think these have whiplashes. Yes, they do. So TF Ash has whiplashes. So these get there a little bit faster. Potentially in time to deny anything trying to capture this point. In addition to just being a very decisive cover of the D point, you don't have a lot of firing angles that can get on you. Your main ones are from above in this big empty space here, and over here, which that is kind of this space where I'm pointing with the move cursor, which is difficult for the enemy to get to without overrunning your entire east side, so you don't often have to worry about that. And there's also a little bit of space down here that if they have mass drivers or something on the other side, they can try and take some shots at you. But they do have to see you first, which is difficult through rocks. Offensively, after you've secured the D point here, you've got very straight and easy access to the E point if you need to take that or defend that. And you also have you have some pretty close access to the E point as well, or the A point as well. It's kind of far. It's 11 kilometers, but you can get there. You can get there in a hurry if you need to. This is this is an aggressive position. There's not a lot of places to retreat, but there is also a lot of just general cover on Tumbleweed, so that's ends up being less important than retreating strategically ends up being less important than knowing where the cover is and knowing how to use that to break line of sight. So of course you can go down and underneath. You can go backwards and down. You can go all the way through the canyon to E. There's a lot of cover through the canyon. You can come around this big rock here. A couple things you can do. Okay, so that's the D side. We're going to go look at the E point side now. And often when you're on Tumbleweed, a very strong play is to actually have two beam fleets covering both the D side and the E side because they can mutually support each other. And they both have relatively easy access to the A point, which means you can control fairly easily many points on the map and win the game that way. So deployment for this one is kind of at this angle, and if you're in the deploy screen, you deploy and you rush as quickly as possible to this little undercropping here, which is about... Interesting. I just noticed the distances don't update if the time's frozen and you select a new ship. So this is about 5.2 kilometers from the E point. It's good to stay kind of hidden here for a little bit. A lot of times when you're playing beams, you kind of want to be known but not seen. That is, you want the enemy to know where you are so they know, hey, I need to stay away from this area. But you don't want them to know exactly where you are, like you don't want to be seen on radars or tracked, because then they can just shoot you. And it makes it easier as well if you know exactly where you are to avoid you. It's tricky to kite beams and stay out of their lethal range, but it's certainly not the hardest thing in the game. There are many harder things to do than that. So for this point, though, it's nice to remain hidden until either they start capping it or you know that the point is safe to move in to, and at that point, you can take your fleet, move it out,
Aye, aye. Proceeding.
aim at the E point. You can position aim, pre-aim your beams so that way
Understood.
you're pointing in the right direction right away, and move to E. And the ultimate move, the secondary move after this play, is to kind of entrench yourself here in this little
Helm, take us
canyon
in.
next to the point. That's not helpful. So if we see the point here, the canyon area is kind of right here, and you can kind of entrench yourself here and make yourself very, very hard to dislodge while covering E point, being able to get to the D point quickly, and being able to cover the A point as well. Because this is more of a not as aggressive position, there are places to go if you need to retreat. Generally, they're to the side or backwards to your team. But you often don't need to do that because, again, this isn't quite as aggressive as a position. So one more on Tumbleweed from the other side this time. So Tumbleguide, red side. Ash, there we go. I see even less ANS on the red side on Tumbleweed than I do on Pillars. But recommend it again. It's a lot of fun to get that sort of change in perspective. We will spawn in here now.
We've got a
And-
question.
We hear you.
Okie dokie. Let
If I
me
could interrupt
pause
just a second.
in. Let's see what we got.
Nightshade
Thank you.
specifically.
Nightshade says, how does that style of be known but not see balance with avoiding eating large indirect missile volleys? So it's a good question. It's difficult. It's a difficult thing as a missile player to fire missiles in such a way that you will catch something in your basket with all of your missiles when you don't know where exactly that thing is behind a rock. It's certainly possible, but a lot of times you might get half a volley that will stage or trigger and seek onto that target. And generally you should have some PD where you can kind of clean up that half a volley. The other thing you can, of course, do as well is just use the rock. A lot of times you'll see the missiles coming before they are close to you. You should have some scouts around so you can see the missiles coming before they get to you. And you can kind of move so that you are not going to be where the missiles are when they get to you. That's part of the reason why you want to kind of have these large pieces of cover, these large pieces of rock cover, so that way you can shift around them and transfer your angles so that you can avoid eating those missiles. Does that help with that question? Cool. DCPT also asked, does setting heading for lead ship set heading for the entire formation? Yes, it does. Okay. Tumbleweed on the red side.
Receiving.
Deployment is kind of at this angle. You rush here. one thing you want to do if you're playing with TF Ash on this side is split your destroyers up so you can cover different angles, like we did on the first pillars section. It's a little harder to cover these angles, but you can get them if you're tricky with your positions and aiming. So one of them can cover D. You're pretty exposed here, so you also often want one to cover the outside in case the other enemy ships start coming on the outside. And then you can have one covering the A point as well, which from here is just 5 kilometers. Not even 4.5. So you can deny that point as well. This is, again, like this is from the opposite side, this is an aggressive position to be in. It is easy to get pushed hard from this outside, so you want to make sure that you have ships here that kind of have radar vision over here, so that way you don't get surprised and quickly and swiftly murdered. If you do get pushed, retreating and kind of ringing around this rock like that is a good way to avoid taking too much fire, but that can, of course, smart enemies might know you're going to do that and have another fleet waiting on the other side. So, as always, scouting is important. That should be reiterated probably every time somebody talks about Nebulous. Okay, I'm going to move on to the next one. I got, I think, 4 more of these. 2 on Styx and 2 on Aorta, sorry. So Styx, we're going to go to the blue side first, and no more questions at the moment. So Styx, if you're not familiar with it, Styx is a mod map. Tumbleweed and Pillars are, of course, both maps that come with the game. By default, Styx is a mod map. You have to download it, but it's pretty good. It is quite purple, and sometimes visibility is hard to see, but we'll do this from the attack view for now. So as before, deploy here, go as fast as possible, and split up your destroyers, or if you're running destroyers, if you have a beam Axford or a beam battleship, you obviously can't split those up. So pick generally the angle that is that lets you cover most of the capture point that you're next to cover. We split these up, so we're pointing one down towards the E point, and we're in range to kind of move out and pick off any stragglers that might show up from an enemy ship push going on the E side. We have one pointing directly up to the C point, so we can cover that point directly. And another one kind of pointing off to the side. You can point it upwards, you can point it downwards, depending on where you see enemy fleet compositions coming from. This is like one of those positions on Tumbleweed. This is an aggressive forward position, but it is also quite hard to dislodge. They have to either come over the top or come around the side, and you can easily rotate around this rock to keep the rock in between you and the incoming bullets or missiles, so that you can't be easily just like pushed off of this rock. As long as you're around the hard cover that you're on, you still have control over that space that you're trying to control. That is Styx for blue side. And if we look at red side is kind of the same thing. Styx is a fairly symmetrical map, but it's good to have this as an example. Sometimes it can be tricky thinking about a map flipped over. It's easier to see it. So, same thing as before. Deploy in the middle, rush here as fast as possible. Unlike before, I don't...
Receiving.
You can cover this E side here, but it's a little farther from this side. So it's a little more risk to push out. You do want to still have one destroyer covering the point directly, and a third destroyer kind of hanging out off to the side where a likely enemy push might come from. A lot of times you actually don't see pushes coming from this side on Styx, but It's a nice, it's an open area that can be used if they know beams are here, used as a staging zone to shoot you before you, without being in range of your beam to be able to fire back. Let's see. And I think that about covers it for sticks. I'm going to move on to Aorta quick, and then we can have a little bit of a Q&A session if we want to do that. So Aorta blue side. Aorta is another mod map. It plays a little bit like Pillars, but its most notable feature is it is shaped like an anatomical human heart, which is kind of cool. There's a fair bit of cover in a lot of surprise path areas. One thing I will also say is each of these kind of positions I'm showing I've used or watched other players use to succeed and win a match. So these are tried and tested. They're not just hypotheticals. So for this one on Aorta, we're kind of deploying. If you look at the display screen, I'll pause the game here so we don't have the enemies talking over us. Deploy roughly in this angle and rush as fast as you can to this area. You are almost in range to cover the A point. You have to move out maybe 500 meters. About this far. Which still leaves you with a lot of cover. You've got a lot of hard cover from the other side. And that that cover makes it hard for you to be dislodged. In addition, being so close to this rock wall here leaves you in a good position to follow up and move out and attack the B point on Aorta. The only concern, the only big concern that is worth really considering in your deployment is this gap here in the top. A lot of times players will sneak shuttles or tugboats or some other thing through this gap, and they can easily turn you into mincemeat if you're not facing the right way. So it can be a good idea to split one of these destroyers off and cover that gap up top. Right. And if you need to retreat, there's lots of cover to retreat back to around these sort of central columns and pillars here. One more for Aorta. This time we're going to look at a different position on the blue side. Aorta is also fairly symmetrical, so you can do these same things from either side. We're going to look at this one with the TF Hemlock fleet. TF Hemlock, again, is the starter fleet with a beam Axford, some missiles, some 250s, and there's a couple of supporting sprinters as well. So this is a more aggressive position to kind of really cover and control and secure this central A point here. Your deployment can look kind of from this angle, deploying here. You can even deploy like sort of around to the side here. But you want to cover and you want to push towards this little crack, this little crevasse here, where you've got some fairly good hard cover from almost all sides. The significant piece of space that you need to be concerned about is this big empty open space here. A lot of times you might find mass drivers or 450 line ships there that can hurt you pretty bad. Fortunately, if you do come up, which you should, if you see the point being captured, you come up to protect the A point, you can immediately move to the right side here and put this big pillar between you and those big nasty line ships. If for some reason you end up pushed really hard, which can happen, OSP can do a big death ball and push all of their fleets onto the A point. Your retreat path is underneath and out to the side or to the other side. And I think for TF Hemlock and Aorta, that about covers most of the strategic considerations and opening plays for some of the common maps that I see played. As I mentioned before, I'm going to make all of these save game setups available so you can take these and practice with them on your own time if you want to. They're all done with the starter fleets, so you don't have to worry about getting into like the shipbuilding aspect of it. You can just play with the starter fleets as they are. Starter fleets are okay. They're good for learning things. TF Ash especially is quite dangerous. Okay, let's go take a look at the questions. So, from Robin, question for other maps that you may not cover. What general rules or variables should we consider when we're deciding on a location to set up shop with beams? So, Dargrib just mentions near cover that's close to a point, and that is generally the core of it. You want to be, well, let's put it another way. So, your role as a ship with a beam on it, with the highest damage, most powerful weapon like in the game, is to be you're a terrifying presence to the enemy team. You want to be in a location that if the enemy team is afraid of you and doesn't want to get near you, they lose the game because they can't do that or they don't want to do that. So you want to be in a position where you have access to control points, and you also want to be in a position where you have some cover so that you aren't seen on radar tracks and you can dodge around bullets or missiles if they start coming at you. Retreat paths, as I covered a lot, are also important because you do want to have a plan for when the plan goes bad. But for the most part, set up near cover, set up close to a point. Those are the core things. And you want to do that as quickly as possible. It's not really a concern if you're spotted right away as you're going to that point because, as I said before, you want them to kind of know where your general area is so they know they need to stay away, and if they stay away, they lose the game. Does that cover that for you, Robin? Awesome. Are there any other questions? So, Nightshade also has a question. So, when setting up a position using mutual supporting beams, would you rather set up the beams centrally to maximize the strength of the hardpoint, or use one beam as a threat and further beams to cover the flanks of that forward position? That's a good question. So, the answer to that question kind of depends on what the rest of your team is also doing. If your team is composed of fleets that like to skirmish, like CLs, where they don't really want to get into a big, long fight and a slugging match for those ships, they want to kind of kill one thing, get out, kill another thing, get out. It's good to set them up as a threat and flanking sort of positions. So where you have the central fleet, that's central beam fleet covering the center of the map, and a flanking team that's kind of flanking around the outside, or the inside, or taking some path that supports your skirmishers in what they're doing. If you're playing as sort of a death ball style strategy where you're balling all your fleets up together, it's better to have all your beams in one spot because it concentrates your firepower and supports your overall team strategy. Good question. I'm going to give a few more seconds for any other questions. And if there are, as usual, these are recorded. It'll go up on YouTube at some point. And you can always feel free to ping me in the Discord server, this Discord server, if you have any other questions about beams or really anything about the game. If I don't know, I'll point you to somebody who does. And that will mostly cover it. Thank you all for coming out to the beam tutorial night. I hope you learned something. I'll post these save game files in the voice text chat channel. And they'll be up there in a couple minutes. That'll end this. So, thanks everyone, and hope you learned something.
Thank you very much for the tutorial, Puppy.
Thank you.
Okay, that closes that out. Simple, straightforward, good, well done. Puppy was fucking prepared for that. Oh my god, he was ready to go. No screwing around on the fleet editor, no. Oh, I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna do that. Just out here wrecking nerds with this peak tutorial game meta. I play too many video games. Yeah, that was good. I don't have much else to conclude that with. I'm going to have the saves that he mentioned on my Google Drive, like I do with a lot of the other things. And posted. That's going to be posted down in the description below. Ba-ba-ba. That's everything. The Discord, there's going to be two Discord invites down below as well. Those of you who may not be familiar with Nebulous Fleet Command, which, if you're not, kind of weird that you're here, but whatever. There's an invite to the main Nebulous Fleet Command Discord, and an invite to my Discord, where we've kind of weirdly become the nucleus for a lot of this stuff, the tutorialization and the teaching of new players. I mean, there's obviously overlap, like all this specifically is hosted out of the main Discord. A lot of the people who put in the time and the effort and the energy hang out in there as well. They can answer questions, and we get games together. So if you're into that sort of thing, if you need people to play with, there you go. Both of those two Discords are good places to find each other, to find people to play with. Puppy was far more prepared for this than I was. Listen to me ramble like a jackass. I'll see you in the battle space, dear viewer. Good night.